Non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, have certainly arrived in the art world. In March of this year, artists like Grimes and Beeple made headlines with multi-million-dollar token drops. Since then, artists of all levels of fame and success have been jumping onto the trend left and right. NFTs have also begun to pop up in the music world. DJ 3Lau and Eminem, among others, have sold or announced the sale of NFTs associated with their music. However, the details of what is actually owned when an NFT is purchased are somewhat dubious. Critics of NFTs as we know them in the music and art world have claimed that NFTs don't really serve any practical purpose, that they are nothing more than speculative investments that have no meaningful future in the art world. However, there are a number of platforms and creators that are seeking to change the functionality of NFTs in art and music. Sam Brukhman, the manager of business development at NFT platform Async.Art, as well as the artistic director of the Verdigris Ensemble, is one such person. The Verdigris Ensemble is an innovative choral ensemble based in Dallas, Texas. As someone who wears a hat in the art world as well as the platform development side of the crypto world, Sam spoke to finance magnates about the ways in which programmable art and music can create practical use cases for NFTs and consequentially create a more interactive artistic experience. The Verdigris Ensemble is also preparing to launch Betty's Notebook, an interactive NFT-based piece of audiovisual media that combines classical music with blockchain technology. I'm Rachel McIntosh, and this is FMTV. So, Sam, I know who you are. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and the work that you do?
Sure. So my name is Sam Brukhman. I'm the business development manager at Async.Art. I'm also the artistic director of a professional choral ensemble in Dallas, Texas called Verdigris Ensemble. I was particularly interested in Async.Art because some of the stuff that they do require give the opportunity for people to create dynamic art pieces, and that was something that I had never seen before prior to making art and making performing art in specific. And so this at this point we're coming up to this uh, sort of fork where both of my worlds collide against each other. It's both like the blockchain tech side and also the art and music side. So really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and excited to talk about this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think most of our listeners probably don't know this, but I also am coming at this from sort of an interesting angle, which is that I have a background in classical singing in addition to the work that I do as a crypto journalist. So this is really cool for me as well. And we're gonna kind of talk to you with both of your hats as the business development lead at Async Art, as well as from your position as a creator with the Verdigris Ensemble. So let's sort of start with this angle from Async Art. So I want to talk a little bit about this thing called programmable art and programmable music. Excuse me. Can you talk a little bit about that and what does that mean? You know, how do NFTs tie into what that is?
Yeah, so the idea of programmable art is the ability to create artworks that change over time.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be done in two primary ways. So, one is through multiple ownership, meaning that certain parts of the artwork can be owned and changed or edited in a way based on the artist's intent. Or the other way is through autonomy or autonomous features, which means time of day, statistical data, geographic location, things like that. And so from that perspective, what async does and what programmable art is it's artwork that changes over time, whether that means through various ownership or that means through autonomous features that only weather, statistical data, and other other features can change. And so let's break down the multiple ownership aspect. So
Mm-hmm.
let's take, for example, a painting of the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is, maybe the Mona Lisa is split into three different parts. Maybe like the first part of Mona Lisa is like her eyes, and the owner of her eyes can basically customize her eye color based on what the artist has provided. So maybe like her eyes can be red, blue, green, yellow, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the next layer of her artwork is what she's wearing. So maybe she could be wearing a sweatshirt or a t-shirt or a tunic or something else, based on the owner's intent. And then the third one is like her background. So like maybe she's inside, maybe she's outside, maybe she's somewhere else, maybe she's on a different planet. And that can all be customized by the person that owns that part. And so as a result, what you get is you get this like sort of community that responds and reacts to one another. So when one person changes an aspect, maybe someone else will change it as well. And that's the beauty of what programmable art is, and that's the beauty of what we see, not just with the visual side but also with the music and audio side, which is launching very soon, and we're very excited about that as well. Currently the audio side only has the multiple ownership feature, although in the future we do see music taking on an autonomous feature, such as like changing the audio based on the time of day, or so on and so forth. And so from that perspective, we're very excited about that, and we think that there's a lot of aspects to explore there.
Really, really cool. So for me, this multiple ownership thing, or the programmable aspect of art and music with NFTs, sort of answers the question of like, what's the point of owning an NFT for art? Because I think a lot of people who are sort of critical of NFTs in general are like, okay, what does it really mean if I own an NFT that's tied to a piece of artwork? It doesn't really do anything. Of course, there's much to be said that NFTs are a speculative investment, and they are something that can help creators make money and investors make money as well. But there's also this other element with programmable art that actually allows the owner to somehow have a say in the way that the art is presented.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I think that Async.Art provides a really unique opportunity for people to interact with the artwork that is created. So one of the things that we find is, there are artists that create all sorts of different styles, whether it's comic strips, whether it's like portraits of people, whether it's like landscapes, but they're all like, they can all be changed, and they can all be customized. And in that sense, like when you have part of that ownership or full ownership or whatever, you are able to influence the way that other people see the artwork. And that's a really powerful thing. I don't think that people necessarily realize it just yet, but what this technology essentially does is, in a completely decentralized way, it gives people the opportunity to be able to influence the way that others, like general people who don't own the artwork, see it, interpret it, like and essentially like interact with it at the end of the day. And that is a really cool thing. When you walk into a museum, and I know this for myself, like I walk into a museum, I explore it for like 2 or 3 hours, and then I'm exhausted because I'm looking at static images, and it's all really amazing and all this different stuff. But after a while, your brain your brain starts to fry a little bit, because you're like, oh my god, there's so much symbology, so much like difference in style, and all this different stuff. What programmability does is it actually allows you to like be a part of the museum. It allows you to be a part of the experience, and that is something that I think, especially for the type of environment that we are in now, with attention spans and new ways of being able to interpret and interact with things. I think this is a great bridge into learning and in creating new ways of interpreting and seeing art.
So is the programmable aspect of Async's NFTs structure sort of something that's unique to Async, or is this something that is elsewhere in the NFT space?
I think there are a couple of different aspects here that we have, that we've seen in the crypto space. Art Blocks, for example, is a platform where you can code something, and then it creates generative random images based on that code. I think that's been the closest that we've seen. There are of course one-off projects that we've seen, with POC and a little bit of programmability with Sotheby's, a little bit. But for the vast majority of people, I think what Async brings is very unique.
Mm.
Um, I think what async does is it allows um, it is like the Adobe Photoshop of programmability, and in that sense, like I think that it is a very unique. It is found in no other place. On the blockchain space, and therefore is something that is sort of being developed on our
Mm.
end.
And so I also want to ask you about sort of the musical side of this. So you mentioned already that on Async there's this NFT ownership control. I'm
Sure.
so sorry, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but you can buy NFTs that control certain aspects of musical projects, and you guys are
Yep.
working on creating also the structure that could support musical works that change based on the time of the day, or et cetera, which is so cool. And I want to ask you now, with your other hat, about the Verdigris Ensemble and this project that you guys have been working on, Betty's Notebook, and how that works with NFTs. So I'll let you take it away, because I know you've been talking about this a lot. Okay.
So as an artist, I'm a trained musician. I started my journey studying choral music or singing vocal music, essentially at a very specialized school called Westminster Choir College in Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
And right around the time, in 2015, I heard about Bitcoin. In 2017, I heard about Ethereum. I entered into those cryptocurrencies around those times, and had wanted to incorporate music and choral singing into crypto for a very long time, really since like 2017. That's around the time that NFTs actually started, but I was
Mm-hmm.
not fully aware of what NFTs were at that point.
Mm.
I am the founder of a professional choir. It's a nonprofit in Dallas, Texas called Verdigris Ensemble. And the whole point of Verdigris Ensemble was and is um, to reach a wider spread of audiences through creative concert programming, unconventional space, and collaboration. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what we try to do at Verdigris is, first of all, we acknowledge that classical music is very exclusive. It's very uh, it's hard for people, especially in this day and age, as we just talked about, to sit in a concert hall for like an hour and a half and, not cheer and not have their phone out and, not take pictures of what they're seeing. It's sort of like this art form that is very exclusive to the people that have grown up with it in church or in school, or, a mixture of both. And what we began to see as we looked at statistics is that um, audiences for classical music are decreasing at staggering rates every
Mm-hmm.
year. And if we don't do anything about it, we won't have classical music in 50 years, which is really, really concerning to me as someone who studied vocal music and that loves choral music, loves vocal music and the genre as a whole. And so when coronavirus happened, I was like, like the big question came up, which is like, how do we continue making music? Because as you might recognize, vocal music and choral music requires multiple people to stand in the same room and to sing with each other. And so, what changed the game was when I recognized and saw what Async.Art was doing from a programmable standpoint on the visual side. And I originally, like, I am not a tech person by nature, but I became very passionate about um, you know crypto and the ability, or this like sort of decentralized way of being able to create content. And so um, I I actually applied to Async in late summer. I came on board as a team member around September, and I think one of the things that was attractive about me was that I had a music background, and at the
Mm-hmm.
time, some of the founders were thinking like, yeah, we definitely want to have a music feature eventually. And the rest is basically history. So what's been great is I've been able to combine both Verdigris and like async art to create this experiential artwork that we'll talk about in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But essentially what this comes down to is, you know, when coronavirus happened, I had no idea what we were going to do in terms of, bringing choral music to audiences, and we had to find some way to do it. And then, as I began to see the development of these different platforms, Async.Art, Nifty Gateway, Super Rare, Maker's Place, Foundation, all these different platforms, I began to see what the possibilities could be with music. And then we got the opportunity, after Async.Art approached us, to be actually create an artwork, or a piece of music that could be programmable, which we'll talk about, on the blockchain. And that was like the answer. That was like, yes, 100%. This is our way of innovating choral music, bringing it to larger audiences, and being able to, do it in a really creative and different way. And so
Right,
that's
right.
where we're at.
Yeah, so I want to kind of zoom out again and look at this from the async perspective, which is that this is, as you said, this is a way in the classical music world, which is sort of a corner of the art world, that it can be particularly alienated or alienating, depending on what side you're on. This is a way to sort of integrate that medium with this new technology, potentially provide a new audience, new exposure, and also to influence the art directly. So basically, this is just another way for artists to get paid, among other things.
Yeah,
Mm,
absolutely. I mean, I think the things that are so unique to NFT artists and NFT art are like three main things. I think
mm,
since the invention of the internet, um, we have not been able to have, a way to track ownership of a piece of art, whether that's music or video or image, on the internet. So I can Google, like, in the past, you've been able to just Google an image, take it, save it, Photoshop it a little bit, repost it as your own, and like 9 times out of 10, you'd be able to get away with it. Blockchain does not allow that anymore.
mm,
It has a clear ownership path, and also it shows, where it has been, the artwork itself, who the owners used to be, who were the owners, where did it come from, etc., etc. But one of the most important parts, to your point, is the not just the initial sale, but also the royalty. Many of these platforms and many of these smart contracts contain 10 10% royalties on every subsequent sale. So, whereas we've had controversial art collectors that would buy, you know up and coming artists at really low prices and then resell for millions, like,
mhm,
all of a sudden we now have this like inverse situation where artists are it's actually in the artist's best interest to have that piece sell
mhm.
again, because they get a royalty out of it every time. And
Right,
so
right.
from that perspective, like, NFT art and crypto art, whatever you want to call it, is a really amazing structure that actually allows for, it allows for artists to make in some cases, like, a steady source of income for the first time.
Mhm,
And that is a game changer. That is a game changer, and particularly classical musicians that have historically always been taken advantage of, and
mhm.
that have always done, like, have always gotten, like, the lowest of the low in terms of pay, unless they work in large symphonies or large organizations, and so on and so forth.
Right, right. I just want to touch on one thing you said really quickly, which is this path of ownership thing. So we have seen, examples of fraud in the NFT space, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. But as you pointed out, there you can see, you can track an NFT, on the Ethereum blockchain, on the Binance Smart Chain, who issued it, and who owned it, and who, as you said, track the path of ownership. So you can always tell if an NFT has come from the artist if that NFT was minted, by the artist, and there's a blockchain record of that.
Yes, 100%. And I think, obviously there are always going to be problems
Mm-hmm.
with the space. There are always going to be things that we can do better. And I think ultimately the responsibility is on the platforms that mint these works, to make sure that the works that are being minted are not, fraudulent. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that, you know, there are steps being taken every day by multiple different platforms, whether it's like with Rarible having to get your account verified first
Mm.
on Twitter or other social media platforms, or, you know, um, platforms like Super Rare Foundation, Async, that actually vet all of the artworks before they're
Mm-hmm.
put out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think the space is becoming better and better about being able to clarify and make sure that the content is legit. Of course, anyone can take an artwork and, you know, like pretend to be Fuocious, for example, or pretend to be, you know, Coldy, or one of the OGs in the crypto space, OG artists. But at the end of the day, you know, you could say that about almost anything, and I would say that the blockchain space is really swiftly addressing these problems and getting much better about it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to make you a host in our Zoom meeting,
Cool.
and I would love to see uh, more about this Betty's Notebook project that
Sure.
Verdigris is producing on Async. I'm not sure if it
Sure.
worked.
Yes, it did.
Yay! Okay, great.
So what we see here is the first of its kind programmable music of Betty's Notebook. What it is, in a nutshell, is an interactive simulation of Amelia Earhart's supposed final distress calls. It's launching on the Async.Art website very soon. What is it? It's a controversial piece of evidence in the Amelia Earhart mystery that some believe record Earhart's final distress calls. So in 1937, a 15-year-old Betty Clank hears what she thinks are these distress calls by Amelia Earhart, because she hears, like, this is Amelia Earhart, this is Amelia Earhart, SOS, SOS. And so she writes it down in her notebook, and for the next like 60 years tries to, you know, go to researchers, museums, you know, all sorts of historians to try and prove that this document is authentic. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, you know, no one really believed her for many years. No, everybody kind of like dismissed her, and I've read recently actually that there were multiple people that heard what she heard on the radio and actually called into the Coast Guard to report it. But to this day, you know, either the information was not recorded properly, or it was not, you know, saved in such a way, because it was not a big deal. The Coast Guard and the Navy basically like dismissed it and said, we have this under control. This is
Mm-hmm.
not what you think it is, etc., etc., etc. But you know, we have documentation that there were calls that came in documenting and saying some of the same words that Betty Clank wrote down in her notebook. Will we ever know whether it's true or not? No, we will never know with certainty, but there is circumstantial evidence that points to the fact that the document is true. And so if we were to describe the piece as in one sentence, we would describe it as this: it's as if we put audiences in front of a shortwave radio and have them turn a tuning knob to try and hear Amelia Earhart's distress calls clearly. But frequently, what we encounter is various radio interferences, and so in that way, this is a simulation. It's a mystery, but also it's like I would equate it to like sort of a game. You know, like I don't know if our viewers are familiar with this game called Myst, which was in the early 2000s, where rather than like walking around, it was like this, you had to like click arrows to go in certain directions on an island to discover like clues on things, and you could there were clickable clues, like you could like look at a footprint and then there would be text that describes what it is, and you would uncover the mystery slowly. Well, Betty's Notebook is essentially that. What we do is we give audiences the ability to become detectives and sleuths
Mm-hmm.
in the Amelia Earhart mystery. And in that sense, we are able to we're able to present sort of a holistic picture of the mystery. So we will never know whether it's true, like I said before, but at least we get this like large picture of what it can be. And within the music, there are lots of like small and obvious and not so obvious, you know, nuggets of gold that we can discover throughout.
Mm-hmm.
And so on a technical level, let's just talk about this like in terms of NFTs. It's a 21-minute programmable piece of music split into 5 different musical pieces. The master track, it's a master track, which is like the masterpiece in and of itself, and then within that you have 4 layers, or stems as we call them. Each layer contains 3 unique audio-visual states that the owner can toggle between. which alters musical texture, timbre, and narrative for all listeners.
Mhm.
Now, I just want to really quickly make it very clear that the owner of these layers does not get to remix these sounds. They get to choose from a menu of options based on the composer's intent to toggle within the larger master track of the piece. And as layer owners toggle between the states of the album art, the album art actually visually shifts to reflect that change. And so here we are. Here's the basic breakdown of what Betty's Notebook is. Layer one is the choir. The choir sings what's written in Betty's Notebook, and so we'll talk about the feature of that. Layer two is Betty's voice. So Betty's voice, it's literally Betty Clank narrating what she heard on that day. And there's a very clear relationship between the choir and Betty's voice. Betty will say things like, and then I heard Amelia say SOS, and then the choir will sing SOS.
Mhm.
Layer three is Betty's choir. Betty's choir is the overall sort of feeling of what the piece sounds like. What the composer did was he took a spectral analysis or like a voice analysis of Betty's speaking voice and isolated certain notes and pitches and then put it back into the texture of the piece. What it ends up sounding like is it sounds like the gentle whirring of an airplane or a propeller, essentially at certain parts, and it's almost like an interference. And from that perspective, like it's also very symbolic because it's Betty not only talking with and interacting with the choir, but Betty's choir is actually singing with the choir and creating
Mhm.
this like overall sort of soundscape. Layer four is Betty's radio. Betty's radio are different jazz standards, that reminiscent jazz standards that were recorded separately by the choir, cut and put through a filter and then put back into the piece. So
Mhm.
it's like as if you're turning a tuning knob and then sometimes you'll hear like little bits and pieces of music that kind of comes onto the radio
Mhm.
and off. And so here's where the programmability of all this comes in. The person who owns the choir layer, which again sings what's written in the notebook, gets to decide how that acoustic sound sounds like. So are they singing in a dry space? Are they singing in a reverberant space? Or are they singing sort of like or does the audience get to hear like some parts in their left ear and then other parts in their right? Layer two is Betty's voice. This is Betty narrating her experience, and she gets to talk about different perspectives of the piece. So the owner of layer two actually gets to change and show different perspectives of the experience, whether that's like Fred Noonan's navigation or her interpretation of the event as a whole, or maybe some other Amelia Earhart things. And this is where the nuggets of gold start to come in. As you start to hear differences in the story, you also get to hear like different parts of what Amelia or of what the distress call entailed. Layer three is Betty's choir. This is the spectral analysis and the overall thing. As the owner of layer three, you get to decide: does the piece sound overall warm or nightmarish or ethereal? You get to decide the overall like state that you get to hear it in. Layer four is the jazz standards, Betty's radio, and you get to decide. The owner of layer four gets to decide which jazz standards play at which time. And as a result, it's this ever changing, ever evolving piece that is tethered to these images. So as you can see, these arrows delineate which parts are being changed at which times. The choir is tethered to these words. The Betty's voice is tethered to the woman. Betty's choir is tethered to the airplane, and Betty's radio is tethered to the texture and color of the radio. And so, as a result, when you change the audio, you also get to change the image. So here's how it sounds. Here's what the choir sounds like. So there it is. That's what the choir
Gorgeous.
sounds like. And again, this is what's written in the notebook. Betty's voice is her narrating. So here she is narrating.
The thing that was different was the Putman. She said that so many times that she could have been saying Amelia Earhart Putman.
Mhm.
And then several times she said SOS.
There it is. So that's kind of her. And the white noise that you hear is like, this was, I think this interview was recorded in the early 2000s. And as a result, like some of the sound, some of the audio, the white noise is still coming through. We tried to clean it up as much as possible, but it also adds sort of like this real nature of the
Gritty
interview. Yeah. And the
sound, yeah.
grittiness. Betty's choir is the spectral analysis. This is perhaps the creepiest or maybe the most unsettling part of the whole thing. This is Betty's voice, isolated certain notes and pitches. Here we are. So you kind of get this idea that it's almost like a gentle whirring of a plane or like a propeller, and at times it creates different sort of soundscapes that either makes you more attracted to the sound or more distressed or more ethereal and so on and so forth. And then finally, saving sort of the most pleasant for last, you have Betty's radio, and here this has been put through a filter but also sung by the choir.
Your inflection and your complexion are red as fire, flush with emotion and failing devotion in a romance so dark. For the paint is wise, it's yours should disguise, but we know that's not what I'll do. If I'm gonna show my dark.
There we go.
Oh, I
So
love it.
That's kind of the choir sound there, and that will sort of weave in and out throughout the transmission. And so as a result, what we find is this like very programmable, ever-changing, customizable piece based on the different pieces that owners own. And so I just talked about the four different layers, and just as an aside, the four different layers, as because they have three unique spots each, it translates to about 81 or 82 different iterations
Okay.
or unique configurations that someone could listen to the piece. And as a result, you get this holistic picture of the mystery and the ever evolving mystery as we go. I mentioned the four layers, but I didn't mention the master. So the master track NFT is essentially the NFT that the person who owns it can claim ownership over that limited edition token on the blockchain, not the IP, but that limited edition token specifically. And what we're doing actually is if the master uh, is sold at the reserve price that we list at auction when it launches, then the owner will actually get a physical radio that has a screen that projects the album cover art, and also the speakers that plays the latest iteration of the piece on command. And so from that perspective, this is actually a really cool addition. It's a physical installation which is like fit for private collections, museums, galleries, and so on and so forth. And so we're really excited about that. And just to show you how many collaborators worked on this project, we had over 26 different people working on this over a period of about 6 months. So Brian Brinkman, who's a prominent NFT artist, he's Emmy Award winning, and up until recently was working full time for Saturday Night Live and Jimmy Fallon. Trey Nagel is a 3-time Grammy Award winning sound engineer. Rick Gillespie is the world's leading researcher on Amelia Earhart, and a founder of Tiger, which is a nonprofit specifically dedicated to recovering and finding out more information on lost aircraft. I think their most compelling investigation was the Amelia Earhart story. Anthony Maglione, who's an award-winning producer, Nicholas Reeves, who's the composer, and myself, who's the founder of Verdigris Ensemble. And right here, you can see all of the singers that have been a part of it. So that's a basic overview of the piece. Rather than talk about it anymore, I think what probably is going to click for people is when they actually get to experience it, and that'll be very soon. As of right now, the release is slated to be Thursday. That is the exact date of that is Thursday the 29th, April 29th. And from there, people will be able to experience it, hear it, change layers if they're the owners of the piece, and really begin to play around with it.
So is this going to be at verdigrismusic.org?
It's actually going to be on the Async.Art website.
On the Async.Art website, okay.
Yeah, so the Async.Art website will launch, and then from there, people will have the opportunity to basically access the recording for free, listen to it for free, bid on the stems or the layers essentially, and bid on the master track, and so on and so forth. Now, there is one last thing that I will just point out here, and that is that we have something called limited edition records, record NFTs, and I'm just going to share this very quickly because. Sure. People ask me all the time, they're like, well, I can't really afford, to buy the master. I don't really think I have the money to buy a stem or a layer. So like, what do I do? Like how can I be a part of this? How can I be a part of this? How can I participate in this? And the answer is this. There is something called limited editions for Async, and the way that they work is actually very interesting. So they are literally snapshots of the work in its current form. So let's say you're like, I don't have I don't have the budget to spend on the stems or the master, but I want to be a part of this. Well, you can buy these blank records, and the way that they work is very interesting. You pay to get a blank record. And that blank record NFT is with you in your wallet, on your MetaMask, whatever. But what you can do is actually, if you like the latest iteration of Betty's Notebook, let's say the latest iteration is like something that's very unique that isn't really being played a whole lot, you can be like, this is my favorite version. Oh, wow. I'm going to record it on this. And as a result, you get this limited edition. So what does that mean? That means that you get to see the following things: the latest version of the cover art, the audio track that does not change, it stays the same, it's the track that you've chosen, the master track owner at the time, the stem owners at the time, and the recorded mix, and also like which edition it is of how many. And so from our perspective, there are platinum, gold, and silver editions. The platinum, I think the lowest that we are going is about $100, and you can do that either through credit card or through cryptocurrency on the website. You can do either to whatever it is that you're choosing. But as a result, what ends up happening is like you're actually like we're creating an opportunity for people to invest in the art product. We believe that Betty's Notebook, and we've been told by many different people that this artwork is destined for really, really great things, and we're working tirelessly behind the scenes to get it as far as it will go. And so as a result, by buying this, you're actually buying into the future of the project. For us, the async release is just the beginning, not the end. And so as an owner of this, you get to be a collector of Betty's Notebook, and you get to be the favorite. You get to sort of follow with the progress and all of this different stuff. And we'll have several platforms by which you can interact with the Verdigris team to be able to find out updates and to hear updates on where Betty's Notebook is at and what's happening within the space and within the project. So that, you have three major options. If you are someone that really loves the work and you want to purchase the master track, you get the ownership of the whole thing. You don't get the opportunity to change it, but you get the opportunity to see it change, and you get the physical radio. If you are like, I want to be able to have a hand in creating the and editing the work, or customizing the work, then you buy a stem. And if you're like, I would rather just like have the work itself as an NFT, you can buy a limited edition NFT, and mint it, and choose your favorite mix, and then mint it whenever you please.
This is so cool. And Sam, I want to thank you so much for sharing about this project. It's, I mean, hats off to you for sure. Like, this is going to be, in my opinion, something that's really, really cool. And I want to ask sort of, who do you expect will buy this? Obviously, like, there's a lot of money floating around in the NFT space right now, sort of generally. So do you think that or have you seen perhaps so far that the most of the interest is coming from NFT investors who are sort of just looking to collect NFTs, or have you also been in touch with perhaps people who aren't necessarily a part of the NFT world, but who are interested in classical music, for example?
We have seen interest from both sides, but we're very particular about the collector that we would like to, choose to gain ownership over the master track NFT, because we really believe in the product, and we really believe in the future of this piece. And so as a result, we want to find a collector that is going to essentially like really believe in the piece, and help us take it to the next level. So, and we've had several conversations with traditional and also crypto collectors over the last couple of weeks. But essentially, at the end of the day, our preference is to find someone that's really going to believe in the work, that's really, really going to believe in the product, and in the future of the product. So, from our perspective, we've seen interest from both sides. I would say that it's interesting. Like, traditional collectors are really interested in it because it is a mixture between what traditional art is, and using the technology aspect. That's a really unique thing. For crypto collectors, what's interesting is the fact that this has the opportunity to permeate not just into the visual art industry, but also into the music industry. And from that perspective, that's a very interesting prospect for NFTs. It's not been done yet, and we really look forward to sort of exploring that further.
So what do you want, looking at this from the perspective of this project, but also from the perspective of somebody who, seems to care, let's say, about the future of classical music and about this art form as a whole? Like, what would be the best outcome for you in terms of how this project is received, and also how this technology is received more generally by the classical music space, and perhaps by the music space more generally?
I really hope that the risk that Verdigris Ensemble is taking on as the first to do this in programmable music will allow others to feel more confidence to enter into the NFT space. I really strongly believe in the future of NFTs, and I believe in the future of music as NFTs. One of the things, and the reason why I believe it, is because for the first time in a very long time, we have the prospect of being able to give musicians a really strong financial output. Now, I'm not saying we necessarily have to like ditch everything that we've been doing. I'm saying that I think that like NFTs could be a great supplement to what is already happening within classical music and so on and so forth. But I hope that through the sale of Betty's Notebook, and through the sale of the stems, and through the sale of everything that's going on, it would be amazing to be able to encourage other organizations and other artists to follow suit, in using leveraging NFTs to be able to create their art, because at the end of the day, this is looping it all the way 360 degrees back to the beginning. Like, the whole point of why we do what we do is because we want to bring um, the arts and choral music and visual art to a wider spread of audiences, and blockchain technology is able to do that, and async art in particular gives new avenues to be able to experience it, create it, interpret it, feel it, and express it. And so from that perspective, like, I think that there's a really strong future for artists. There's a really strong future for musicians, and I really hope that Betty's Notebook is a strong pillar to those that are like sort of on the edge about whether they want to enter into NFTs, from the classical music industry, from the music industry at large, et cetera, to enter into the space and to be confident that their projects and their work is going to be seen and heard.
Absolutely. And I want to just quickly touch on, you sort of implied already that people might be hesitant, and I mean, we both know that the NFT space has been met with a ton of criticism. We already talked a little bit about the fraud aspect, but there's also, sort of the main point of contention about NFTs is the environmental impact, and that is a really important issue that does need to be addressed. So, I wonder how you and how Verdigris is approaching that. I'm sure that you thought, at some point that you might be met with some criticism about this, and of course also, there's the issue of exactly how NFTs impact the environment is not cut and dry. I'm not, certainly don't want to accuse you of like of killing the rainforest or anything like that, but I am curious, from your perspective, how are you gonna handle that criticism?
Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it is unquestionable that NFTs, as we continue to build technology, we have to be a carbon zero output in technology. There's no question about that, and I think that, like, I strongly believe in that. And I think everybody that's been a part of this project strongly believes in that. And so, like, because at the end of the day, from the perspective of what we're doing, like, the point is actually to lessen the carbon output rather than increase it. And so we're taking several steps in doing that. So first of all, just on a fundamental level, what we're this NFT, when we mint it, we're going to be carbon offsetting all of the costs, that the equivalent of how much we mint. So there are several organizations that we're currently looking into, several actually that have been organized by crypto artists and NFT collectors and artists. Whether that's Art Gnome or Green NFTs, or calculating how much needs to be put back into the environment as a result of minting, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, like, this is our way of actually also using, because we have to make a choice. Are we going to create an album along with this? And if so, what does that look like? Are we going to be distributing CDs? Are we going to be, because that's all a carbon addition as it is. And so from our perspective, we have a very big conversation to ensue about, like, is this going to be the only release? Are we going to release it in other ways? And if so, are we going to, like, how are we going to, figure that out? So I think the most obvious answer to your question is carbon offsetting. I think the second thing to consider is that, this is not going to be our last. It is our first, but it will not be our last. And there are, as we continue to see the development of the NFT space, there are a lot of different platforms where you can mint audio NFTs, and there are a lot of companies that are actually looking at different blockchains. So, like, blockchains such as Flow or Tezos or other aspects, like, they are a lot more efficient than blockchains like Ethereum. And Ethereum itself is not soon necessarily, but eventually launching a lot more eco-friendly, efficient blockchain update to everything. So, as we continue, this is our first sort of foray into this. We are well aware of the environmental aspects, and as it stands right now, many of these companies, many of these minting platforms are on the Ethereum blockchain, but we also know that many of these companies and places are also exploring different blockchains for future consumptions. Iketnunk is a platform that just launched on the Tezos blockchain that allows for efficiency and eco-friendly cryptocurrency and exchange, NFT exchange. And so from that aspect, we're exploring all options right now. So I think that there are a lot of ways to sort of mitigate this, but I don't think that there's a very easy answer. I think, like for us, the way that we address this is as a baseline, carbon offsetting, and then from there to figure out like, well, should we create a physical CD out of this, or should we keep it just online? And trying to figure out ways to sort of mitigate that on top of also creating donating part of the proceeds to the equivalent of the carbon offset.
And then also, is that something that Async is sort of addressing directly at this point?
I think the way that Async is addressing this is by looking at other blockchains and looking at other technologies to efficiently fix the problem, because ultimately, like, carbon offsetting is not the it's not the answer to a question. It is a solution. It is a short-term bandage solution. The long-term sustainable solution is actually developing the technology for an efficient blockchain. And that's, I think, what many companies, including Async.Art, are currently striving for.
Okay. Sam, it's an honor and a pleasure. Before we go, can you tell us a little bit about can you tell our users, our listeners, where they can find out more about you, Async, and the Verdigris Ensemble?
Sure. So Async.Art. If you look at Twitter, Instagram, Async, you'll find Async. All you need to do is just type in Async.Art. You'll find it. Please feel free to follow myself at Sam Brukhman. If there are any questions or anything that need to be talked about here, any questions that you have, I'm happy to have an offline conversation. So feel free to reach out to myself or Async directly. And then finally, Verdigris Ensemble. We are a Dallas-based ensemble, but our reach is national. Betty's Notebook was featured on NPR and several other publications and several forthcoming. And what we do is really on a national scale, including future videos and performances and so on and so forth. So please follow us, verdigrismusic.org, VERDIGRIS music.org, or you can follow us at Verdigris Ensemble on Twitter, Verdigris Ensemble on Instagram, or on Facebook. So we're on all of those platforms. So looking forward to seeing and hearing from you, and happy to answer any further questions.
Awesome. Sam, thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.